What's the creepiest town in the USA in your opinion? What do you think is the creepiest city in the US? I'm waiting in the comments. Enjoy the show. Story 1. Providence, RI. I love the place. It's not a bad thing. I just remember spending a Halloween weekend there to see a couple of concerts. I was reading an H.P. Lovecraft collection and realized the book sounded a lot like the place I was in. After I left, I realized he's from there, and the stories took place right where I was. I wish I'd known, or I could have visited his grave. I was also seeing Guar and the Misfits that weekend, and ended up walking back to my hotel covered head to toe in fake blood. I walked by a cruiser with 2 cops having their dinner. They see me dripping red, and they just shrugged their shoulders. The entire city had a very Victorian Gothic feel when I was there. It's been a while, so it might have changed. I hope not, because it was great. Also, the mob is supposedly big there, but I had no problems with them. Story 2. I may have just gotten the wrong impression because I literally just stopped for lunch while driving across the country. But Omaha sticks out in my mind as the creepiest. Also, one of the few times in my life when someone blatantly said something racist to me. Or at least the comment seemed racist to me. And I've been to 44 states and several other counties. Story 3. I'm not sure the name of the town, but a friend and I left Belton, Texas at midnight after serving as groomsmen in a wedding. We were headed back out to CA in the bride's car, hauling it out to Los Angeles as a gift to the couple for their move back west after their honeymoon. It was about 2 a.m., and time for the first shift change in driving. I pulled over in an empty grocery store parking lot so my friend and I could switch. The town we were in had to have had approximately 1 stoplight flashing red and 0 other cars on the road. Barely a streetlight on, no gas stations, nothing. Just for context, Belton is along the 38, a major highway running north-south between Austin and Waco, and whatever town we were in was halfway between there and bumfuck nowhere, seeing as how we followed Google Maps' suggestion to take the quicker backroads route rather than head a few hours out of our way south to link up with the 10 in San Antonio. Anyways, I park and wake up my friend, and it's about this time he decides he should tell me he's not sure if he remembers how to drive stick or not. We naively figure it's safe enough to take a couple of test loops in the parking lot since we hadn't seen another living soul since pulling into town, and on or about his second time stalling the car, a pair of floodlights hit us, as the local sheriff materializes out of nowhere in an unmarked car with a, "You fellas okay?" One awkward conversation and a few puckered buttholes later, and my friend remembered how to drive stick really quick. Story 4. Wilcox, Arizona. My daughter was on a trip with an art collective to set up a stage in Arco Santi. Their bus broke down in Wilcox, but they got it going. While she was waiting, she bought me a WW2 copper mug at an antique shop. She knew I liked mules. The group made it to the show and things went well. On the way back, the bus broke down in the same area. They ended up stranded again in Wilcox, Arizona. The cost of getting the non-operable bus back to FL was out of scope, and they were forced to abandon it and get home by other means. When she got back, she told me the story and gave me my WW2 copper mug. I loved it. I cleaned out the inside very well with an SOS pad and poured myself a mule. I was so sick after that. There's no reason why a copper cup would make you sick. Copper is an antibacterial. That one did. My next experience in Wilcox was during my moving trip from FL to AZ. I was driving my bus and nearly got hit by a house on the freeway passing by Wilcox, Arizona. Bus hits house is not a story. House hits bus is a story for another day. Later, I did a bit of research to find out what is the deal with Wilcox, Arizona. It's just too odd for me to have been the first to have noticed. I was right. The macabre stories about Wilcox go back to WW2 when some Nazis were captured by the U.S. and sold us a bill of goods. They convinced the U.S. government to supply them with children on whom they would perform abominable acts. These children were mostly poor, of color, or mentally or physically challenged. They were taken by the U.S. government and supplied to Nazis for their pleasure. Fuck Wilcox, AZ. May I never have to set foot there. Story 5. Uvalde, Texas. That place had a dreadful feeling about it, like everyone was miserable. I stopped there to pick up some stuff when I went to Garner State Park and everyone just stares at you. This was before what happened. Yeah, that one event. Some dude was trying to start some shit with me, and I was just trying to pick up some camping gear, lol. My guess is nobody has anything better else to do. Definitely felt like I was in the hills, have eyes. Story 6. Back in my truck driving days, I passed through a little town in Ohio, New Bremen. Creepiest damn place I've ever been through. Like it was straight out of a Stephen King novel. All the houses and yards were just picture perfect. Grass was perfect. Random rosaries and Jesus statues in the windows. Few swing sets here and there. And not a damn soul in sight. I'm sure I just must have passed through at the right time. But seeing those swings on a pretty summer day. No kids, not a single person walking or driving. That shit creeped me the fuck out. Story 7. Have seen nearly all 50 states, many of them multiple times. I'd say that some of the creepiest areas are any of the small towns in Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, and even Ohio. Cornfields and stereotypical creepy standard white America vibes. Just so eerie Jeepers Creepers vibes. Also would say the more rural areas of Mississippi, Alabama, and East TX specifically, and areas of north central Maine where there's not lots going on. Story 8, Celebration, Florida. Went there on a whim for some food after a hiking trip and felt like something was very, very off. Nothing about this place seemed normal. The architecture being foreign from your typical standard Floridian infrastructure. Basically, it's like they took part of the Disney resort, slapped it in the middle of nowhere surrounded by trees, and sucked the Disney magic right out of it. It's the type of town where if someone thinks you don't belong, they'll do something about it. Not even in a racist way, but more like a "you are not one of us" type beat. The whole town could be the set of a horror movie TBH. Story 9. Jerome, Arizona. Its roadways, building foundations, and concrete walls are literally made of dead bodies. It was a mining town in the late 1800 SS/early 1900s. The head honchos gave zero shits about their employees. Shocker. So when they'd inevitably die from poor working conditions, they had no money for a proper burial and were burned up in the company smelter. Their remnants, aka slag, were piled up on the hillside. Built predominantly of wood, the town burned multiple times, until a new ordinance forced future buildings to made of concrete. Concrete needs an aggregate, and it just so happens that slag is just right, aka dead bodies. Jerome is supposedly quite haunted, and it's not hard to imagine why. I'd like to note that today it is an incredibly charming little town, and I think the spooky history adds to that charm. I recommend staying at the Connor Hotel and getting your tintype taken by John, who will be standing on a random side street. It's a small town. He's hard to miss. Story 10. Hesperia, California by far. My brother played travel baseball as a kid, and we frequently had tournaments there. This one specific baseball field had a literal dump yard right behind it. Miles of open desert just surrounded by nothing but Joshua trees and people's shit they left there. It was literally directly behind the field, so I'd explore for hours as a kid and was so fascinated by it. Saw a literal boat out there once, mostly kids' toys, honestly. Got a little scared after finding hypodermic needles in various spots. I knew better then to touch, LOL. And even some bloody clothes were left out there. Story 11. Okay, it's not the USA, but North Bay, Ontario. They have shadfly season every year, where everything, every fucking thing, gets coated in bugs. They live for 2 days, just lay eggs, shed their skin, and die. They don't even eat. They're sticky. They're the worst fucking flyers, and once they die, their corpses pile up in doorways, around lampposts, in sewer grates, etc. I lived there for one of those seasons, and then I got the fuck out of that city. I'm still haunted by it. Just look it up. ETA. Shadflies are also known as mayflies or lake flies. I've just always known them as shadflies. Story 12. Black Star Canyon, California. You can hike through there, and a lot of people like to ghost hunt because they say it's haunted. There was a massacre there and some mining accidents. What's really creepy are the residents, though. Some real strange and violent people out there. Lots of drugs and people have been attacked and robbed. When I drove through the canyon, I remember it was very quiet. No crickets, no wind, just darkness. I was mostly worried about wild animals and tweakers, but there was definitely a heaviness there. Like I was being watched. Freaky. Story 13, DC, and it's not even close. Cover-ups for pedophiles like Dennis Hastert. Those who, allegedly, propositioned kids like Mark Foley and Jim Kobe, accepting payoffs campaign contributions from fruit companies to use the CIA to help overthrow peaceful local governments across South America and the Pacific, causing untold deaths and working with numerous war criminals. Story 14. There are probably better answers in this thread, but the most uncomfortable I've ever felt as a grown straight white dude in the company of 3 other grown straight white dudes was Phoenix, Oregon. We were on a road trip down to Cali, stopped on the way, decided to grab a drink, walked over to the nearest bar, which happened to be hosting a karaoke night. Missed red flag. We walked in, and it was the only time I've experienced an actual record scratch moment where everything froze and everyone immediately stared at us. First thing I noticed was a sign above the bar that said, "We don't serve tweakers." Dudes I was with were a bit clueless about our situation, but it was extremely uncomfortable and obviously a Klan rally. I convinced them to leave after our first beer. Story 15, a town in New Mexico, don't remember the name, but I do remember stopping there for food at a breakfast joint, and as I'm walking in, some guy comes out and just stares at me like 5 inches from my face, just looks me up and down, says nothing. He looked very schizo, and across the street was a shitty motel where bikers were obviously selling meth. But the creepy part is I go inside to eat and the place is packed, but it was just dead silent in there. People at every table just saying nothing to eat. Utter complete silence was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. Maybe people from New Mexico just aren't talkers, but I don't know, just as insane. I could hear myself breathing. Got out of that town quick. Story 16, Butte, Montana. I have had nothing but strange experiences in the entire state of Montana. Very random state, LOLIK. But Butte was definitely the most fascinating in a creepy way. It's an old mining town and home to the deadliest hard rock mining disaster in world history. We drove through for around a half hour just looking around, and there was not a single car on the road, not a single person out walking around. And my mom had claimed this was a big tourist spot. The architecture was beautiful, but it felt like a ghost town. Story 17. There was a town in Alabama I found myself cycling through. Myself and our group were looking for directions to accommodate cyclists, as many main routes have signage that prohibits cycling, and cops are plentiful. So, we stopped by this small town. We are very out of place there. It's late and the sun has almost set. We walk into a bar to get directions. Live music completely stops. 3 guys and a woman all dressed like Lance Armstrong halted all bar operations. We were terrified. We explained to the barkeep that we were Canadian cyclists looking to find a hotel for the night. Their response? Canadians? Back to the bar, boys. We shared a drink or two and left, but not before taking in some sage advice. Don't go to the next town over. Those folks are just bad people. Well, the directions were shit for cyclists, and we had no choice but to travel to the neighboring town. We arrive in the neighboring town looking for a hotel. They are just as nice and welcoming as those in the previous town. The clerk at the hotel asks, "Where y'all coming from?" And we say something like, "Just came 5 miles westbound from X town." The clerk looks at me like I'm a freaking UFO, and then he says, "I wouldn't be caught dead in that sheethole. Those people can't be trusted. Best you hole up here and have a full breakfast." We thought it was funny as hell that the 2 towns hated each other while being so close together, and both towns had such nice people. Their only hatred was for the people of the other town. Story 18. I had a super weird night in Amarillo, Texas when I was 17. I was moving from Houston to Colorado, and my mom begged me to not stay in a motel. Well, my rebellious ass stayed in a motel next to a strip club. The parking lot filled up and the motel became party central, with a gang of sketchy dudes pounding on my door all night. I called the front desk to ask them to get these guys to leave me alone. The manager said anxiously, "Just go to sleep. Just go to sleep." Anyways, I'm sure Amarillo is fine, but it's forever creepy as hell to me. Story 19. Yup, the FLDS. We colloquially refer to them as polygamists, or pleegs if we're feeling derogatory. I live in southern Utah, and they've started seriously moving in here. Key, they're able to get lots of money from tax loopholes. Either way, they've started buying up a lot of the larger, nicer houses in my town. They're a lot more open about their infiltration than standard LDS. Although the LDS church does a fine job of worming their way into power structures. They're kept out of government here so far because people really don't like them. There's a feud between standard LDS and FLDS about who the prophet is. It leads to a lot of bad blood sometimes. The non-LDS folk like me can't stand them because they're even more self-righteous and assholish than all but the most self-righteous and assholish of the standard LDS faith. Definitely a scary group, though. They reproduce like wildfire, so they've got a ton of children to indoctrinate into their cult. Story 20. Ceres, Virginia. I had family up there who lived in a big old farmhouse. You had to drive up a long, narrow mountain road for about 30 miles to get there, and there was no cell phone reception regardless of what carrier you had. The houses up that way were far and few between, with the closest towns being small patches of fast food restaurants and convenience stores about 35-40 minutes away. I will say that nothing bad ever happened to my family or me when we went out there to visit. However, there is something about that level of complete isolation and being so far removed from town that unsettles me. If something bad happened to you out there, it could be over an hour before police or an ambulance got to you. If you went missing, it could be weeks before someone would even know where to start looking. Not to mention, perhaps it's not outright terrifying like some of these deserted West Coast locations, but the eeriness of dense Appalachian woods is one that should never be downplayed. Story 21. I haven't seen it mentioned, but just get off the highway down into Butte La Rose or go further deep past Houma in southern Louisiana, That is a creepy quality all its own. The bayou and swamps at night is as otherworldly as life gets. The people just sorta exist, and they know if you're not one of them. I've been pretty deep in the swamps with some acquaintances who grew up there. Worth the visit, if you know someone, but it's remarkably eerie. There's a reason so many ghost stories center on New Orleans, though it's really just the tip of the bayou iceberg. Story 22. America is hands down still the Wild West, in my opinion. I would honestly rather take my chances in the rainforest than most of the more secluded areas of America. Like, not only do you have to worry about nature out there, wild animals that can actually kill you, tornadoes, deserts, mountains, but the people all have guns and are either tweaked on moonshine, extremely racist, or all of the above. Not even to mention the weird ghost shit y'all have Lamau. And your government is fucking weird too. Like Jesus. I do not envy those who brave it out there. Shit's no joke. Story 23. Well, when I drove through Aguila, Arizona, several times late at night in the 2000s, it was famous for A, murders, B, Joe Arpaio refusing to send deputies, C, waitresses in the local diner having sidearms, and D, absolutely no cell phone service. So I drove as carefully through Aguila every time I went through there. Don't need, want, or ever desire to be stuck in near Aguila wanting roadside help. Edited to add, I've been to Skid Row a good 100 times. Give me the predictability of that over a real old west town like Aguila during the Sheriff Joe Idgaff days. Story 24. Maybe not a town, but hair-raisingly odd place. Zix. Man, Louisiana to Vegas traffic is slow. Is that a pack of wild ass? Oh, he's going after her. Oh dear, he's going after her too. Another. The stamina on that ass. Wow, honey, was the kid asleep or watching the free show and hearing me? Oh boy, another. Virga and lightning storm. Smells so good for something that can make your hair stand up by premonition as well as electrostatic charge. Piss stop. I have a lady-sized bladder and Barstow is a ways out in this traffic. I'll be just this side of the car. Just don't look. You know the size of coyote that everyone posts online and asks, is this a wolf? 10 feet away. WTF. It's supposed to be a desert. There's crazy clouds, fauna out the nose, and a ton of silver ghost towns nearby with visible mine openings, the Joshua trees not caring. I've driven through Zix 30 or 40 times, weird stuff 30% of the time. Story 25. I have no idea where this was, but remember it distinctly from a childhood vacation. Our family always drove us, and our trailer on our way to campsites for vacation all over the U.S., we usually went west from Missouri area. We came to a small town on our way, planned to find the city park, and stop for lunch. The entire duration of our lunch, unpack to a table in the park, make, eat, clean up. We didn't see a single person or car. We did see, however, many cardboard cutouts of children and couples placed all over the town, but never an actual person. Story 26. For my money, it's Fresno, California. I stopped there in the middle of the night once for gas, and got lost driving around in the middle of the southern part of the city. Whomever is in charge of civil engineering there should be publicly flogged and then fired. They barricade roads in the city so you're driving along when suddenly the road ends. You do a 180 and start driving the other way to be guided into another labyrinth of mazes where you end up hitting another barricade. It wouldn't be so bad, but all while this was happening, there are fentanyl-induced homeless people roaming around the streets like zombies. There are interment campfires all along the roads, and while you're stuck there doing a roundabout, they stare at you as though they're considering killing you and eating your brains. I'm never stopping in Fresno ever again. In fact, I avoid CA 99 now and take I-5. Story 27. If you're adventurous and have a truck, you can find the old Forest Service roads on the side of Mount St. Helens that got blown out by the eruption. I found them at night driving through there on a whim. Old Forest Service signs with half of the sign melted or blown off, completely overgrown roads, muddy trails, absolutely no light. It was a clear sky with a full moon, and I shit you not, I couldn't see more than 50 feet ahead of me with the brights on. Eeriest shit I've explored, and I grew up exploring abandoned asylums and prisons. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, like it. Be sure to write comments and share your stories.